There's something uniquely unsettling about the footage captured by home security cameras. Unlike horror movies or urban legends, these moments are real, unfiltered slices of life that reveal just how thin the line is between safety and chaos. We install these cameras for peace of mind, to keep an eye on our homes, our families, our lives. But sometimes, what they capture is the very thing that keeps us up at night. Tonight, I'm going to share with you 4 true stories, each one a terrifying moment caught on a home security camera. These aren't just stories, they're warnings, reminders that sometimes the scariest things happen when we least expect them, right in the places we feel safest. Our first story comes from a quiet suburb in the Midwest, the kind of neighborhood where people wave to each other from their driveways and kids ride bikes until the streetlights flicker on. The family at the center of the story, the Harrisons, had always felt secure in their home. They'd lived there for over a decade, watched their children grow up, celebrated birthdays and holidays, and never once thought twice about their safety. That changed one night in late October when their newly installed security system captured something that would haunt them for years. It started as an ordinary evening. The Harrisons had just finished dinner, the kids were upstairs doing homework, and the parents were cleaning up in the kitchen. Outside, the wind rattled the last of the autumn leaves across the driveway. At 9:17 p.m., the motion sensor on the front porch camera was triggered. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a stray cat or maybe a gust of wind. But when Mr. Harrison checked the live feed on his phone, he saw a figure standing perfectly still at the edge of their property, just beyond the reach of the porch light. The figure was tall, dressed in dark clothing, and wore a hood pulled low over their face. They didn't move, didn't approach the house, just stood there, watching. Mr. Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. He zoomed in, trying to get a better look, but the camera's night vision only made the figure's features more indistinct, almost ghostly. He called out to his wife, who joined him at the window, peering out into the darkness. But by the time they looked, the figure was gone. They tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe a teenager playing a prank. But when they reviewed the footage, they realized the figure had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, unmoving, just watching the house. That night, they double-checked the locks and left a light on in the hallway, but sleep didn't come easily. The next night, at almost the exact same time, the camera was triggered again. This time, the figure was closer, standing at the foot of the driveway, just a few steps from the front door. The Harrisons called the police, who arrived within minutes, but found nothing. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. The officers suggested it might be a Halloween prank, but the Harrisons couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. For the next week, the pattern continued. Every night, the figure appeared, always a little closer, always standing perfectly still, always vanishing before anyone could confront them. The police increased their patrols, but the figure never showed up when they were around. The Harrisons' children were terrified, refusing to sleep in their own rooms. The family started sleeping together in the living room, the security feed playing on the TV all night. On the 7th night, everything changed. At 2:43 a.m., the camera inside the garage was triggered. The Harrisons, already on edge, awoke to the sound of the alert. Mr. Harrison grabbed a baseball bat and crept downstairs, his wife following close behind. The garage door was closed, but the camera feed showed movement. Someone was inside. They watched in horror as the figure, now clearly visible in the harsh light of the garage, moved methodically from one side to the other, opening drawers, rifling through boxes, pausing occasionally to look directly into the camera. The police were called again, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. This time, though, they found evidence, a set of muddy footprints leading from the garage to the backyard, and a single glove left behind on the workbench. The Harrisons never saw the figure again after that night. The police never identified the intruder, and the glove yielded no fingerprints. But the footage remained, a chilling reminder that sometimes the things we fear most are the ones we can't explain. The Harrisons moved out a few months later, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. The new owners installed even more cameras, But as far as anyone knows, the figure never returned. It's easy to dismiss stories like this as paranoia, to believe that nothing truly bad can happen in the comfort of your own home. But the camera doesn't lie. It captures what we miss, what we ignore, what we're too afraid to see. And sometimes it shows us that the monsters aren't just in our imaginations, they're right outside our doors.
Our second story takes us to a different kind of neighborhood, one that's not quite rural, not quite suburban, but somewhere in between. The kind of place where houses are spaced far apart, where the darkness between porch lights feels endless, and where the silence at night is so complete that even the smallest sound can make your heart race. This is where the Tran family lived, a young couple with a toddler who had just moved into their dream home on the edge of a wooded lot. They'd always wanted space, privacy, a place where their son could grow up surrounded by nature. But as they would soon learn, isolation can be a double-edged sword. The Trans had installed a set of security cameras around their property, mostly as a precaution. They weren't worried about crime. If anything, they were more concerned about wildlife. Coyotes, raccoons, even the occasional bear had been spotted in the area, and they wanted to make sure their son and their dog were safe. The cameras were set to record whenever motion was detected, and for the first few months, the only things they captured were deer wandering through the backyard and the occasional fox darting across the driveway. That changed one night in early spring. It was just after midnight when the camera facing the back porch was triggered. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shadow moving across the lawn, but as the footage continued, it became clear that someone was there, someone moving slowly, deliberately, just beyond the edge of the porch light. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothing, their face obscured by a mask. They moved with an eerie confidence, as if they knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them. The next morning, Mrs. Tran found muddy footprints on the porch steps. She showed the footage to her husband, who tried to reassure her that it was probably just a trespasser, maybe a teenager from the next town over. But Mrs. Tran couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She started checking the camera feeds every night before bed, her anxiety growing with each passing day. A week later, the camera caught the figure again, this time much closer to the house. The footage showed the masked person standing at the back door, their hand pressed against the glass, peering inside. They stood there for nearly 5 minutes, unmoving, before turning and disappearing into the darkness. The Trans called the police, who took a report, but found no evidence, no fingerprints, nothing to suggest who the intruder might be. The family's sense of safety was shattered. They started locking every door and window, keeping the lights on all night, even sleeping with a baseball bat by the bed. But the cameras kept catching glimpses of the figure, always at night, always just out of reach, always watching. The police increased their patrols, but the property was so isolated that it was impossible to cover every angle. Then one night, the situation escalated. The camera in the toddler room, which had been installed more for baby monitoring than security, was triggered at 3:12 a.m. The footage showed the child sleeping peacefully in the crib, the soft glow of a nightlight illuminating the room. But in the corner of the frame, a shadow moved, a figure standing just outside the window, watching. The masked face pressed against the glass, eyes fixed on the sleeping child. Mrs. Tran woke to the sound of the alert on her phone. She rushed to her son's room, heart pounding, but by the time she got there, the figure was gone. The police arrived within minutes, but again, no sign of the intruder. The only evidence was the footage, a grainy black and white image of a masked face staring into the nursery. The Trans didn't wait for another incident. They packed their bags that night and moved in with relatives across town. The house sat empty for months, the security cameras still recording, still watching. Eventually, the property was sold, and the new owners installed even more cameras, but as far as anyone knows, the masked figure never returned. What makes the story so terrifying isn't just the footage itself, but the sense of violation, the knowledge that someone was watching, waiting, planning. The cameras were meant to protect, to provide peace of mind, But instead, they became a window into a nightmare. The footage is still out there, a chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones that go bump in the night. They're the ones that watch and wait and never leave a trace. It's easy to think of home as a sanctuary, a place where the outside world can't touch us. But the truth is, safety is an illusion, and sometimes the things we fear most are the ones we can't see until it's too late. The trans learned that lesson the hard way, and their story is a warning to all of us. Sometimes the monsters are real, and sometimes they're just outside the window.
Our third story comes from a place that, on the surface, seems almost immune to fear. A gated community in Southern California where palm trees line the streets and every house looks like it was plucked from a magazine. The residents here pride themselves on their sense of security. There are guards at the entrance, cameras on every corner, and neighbors who look out for each other. But as the Patel family would soon discover, no amount of gates or guards can keep out the things that truly haunt us. The Patels had moved into their new home just a few months before the incident. They were a close-knit family, 2 parents, a teenage daughter, and a golden retriever named Max. Their house was equipped with a state-of-the-art security system, complete with motion sensors, alarms, and a network of cameras that covered every inch of the property. It was the kind of setup that made you feel invincible, untouchable. But sometimes the things we trust to protect us are the very things that reveal our deepest vulnerabilities. It was a Friday night in late June, the kind of night when the air is thick with the promise of summer. The Patels had just finished dinner, and their daughter, Priya, was upstairs video chatting with friends. Mr. Patel was in the living room watching TV, while Mrs. Patel took Max out for a walk around the block. Everything felt normal, routine, safe. At 10:41 p.m., the camera facing the backyard pool was triggered. At first, it seemed like nothing. Just Max running along the fence, chasing a rabbit. But as the footage continued, something strange happened. The camera picked up a second figure, moving along the edge of the property, just beyond the pool lights. The figure was tall, dressed in black, and moved with a strange, jerky gait, almost as if they were limping or dragging one leg behind them. Mr. Patel noticed the alert on his phone and pulled up the live feed. He watched as the figure moved closer to the house, pausing every few steps to look around, as if making sure they weren't being watched. The figure stopped at the sliding glass door, peering inside, their face obscured by a hood. Mr. Patel's heart pounded in his chest. He called out to Priya, telling her to stay upstairs, then dialed his wife, who was just a few houses away. Mrs. Patel rushed home, Max barking furiously at her side. By the time she arrived, the figure was gone. The police were called, and the footage was reviewed, but there was no sign of forced entry, no evidence left behind. The officers suggested it might have been a prowler, someone looking for an easy target, but the Patels couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something they were missing. The next night, the camera was triggered again, this time inside the house. The footage showed the living room, empty except for Max, who was lying on the rug. Suddenly, the dog sat up, ears perked, staring at the sliding glass door. The door, which had been locked, slowly slid open. Max began to growl, low and deep, as the figure from the night before stepped inside. The figure moved with the same strange, jerky gait, their face still hidden. They walked through the living room, pausing to look at family photos on the wall, then turned and stared directly into the camera. For a moment, it felt like the figure could see through the lens, as if they knew they were being watched. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the figure turned and left, the door sliding shut behind them. The Patels were terrified. They checked every lock, every window, every door, but found nothing out of place. The security system had not been triggered, the alarms had not gone off.
It was as if the figure had simply appeared and disappeared at will. The police were called again, but the footage offered no clues. No fingerprints, no footprints, nothing to suggest how the figure had gotten in or out. For weeks, the family lived in fear, jumping at every sound, checking the cameras obsessively. Max refused to go near the sliding glass door, growling whenever anyone approached it. The Patels considered moving, but the thought of leaving their home, their sanctuary, was almost as frightening as staying. Then one night, the cameras caught something even stranger. The footage showed the living room, empty and still. Suddenly, the sliding glass door began to rattle, as if someone was trying to force it open. Max barked furiously, but the door held. The figure appeared again, this time on the outside, pressing their face against the glass. For the first time, the camera caught a clear image, a pale, gaunt face, eyes wide and unblinking, mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. The police took the footage seriously this time, circulating it to other departments, but no one recognized the face. The figure was never identified, never caught. The Patels eventually moved on, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched, that their home had been violated in a way that could never be undone. What makes this story so chilling isn't just the footage, but the sense of helplessness. The realization that sometimes, no matter how many precautions we take, we are never truly safe. The cameras, the alarms, the gates, they can only do so much. In the end, it's the things we can't see, the things we can't explain, that haunt us the most.
Our final story takes us to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, a place where the rain never seems to stop and the forests press in close around every neighborhood. The kind of town where everyone knows each other, where secrets are hard to keep, and where the line between the wild and the civilized is always a little blurred. This is where the Jensen family lived, a single mother, her teenage son, and their elderly dog, Daisy. They had moved to the edge of town after a difficult divorce, hoping for a fresh start, a quieter life. But what they found instead was a mystery that would shake their sense of reality to its core. The Jensen's house was old, with creaky floors and drafty windows, but it had charm, a big backyard, a wraparound porch, and most importantly, a sense of privacy. Or so they thought. After a string of petty thefts in the area, Mrs. Jensen decided to install a set of security cameras around the property. She wasn't expecting much, maybe to catch a raccoon in the trash or a neighbor's cat prowling the garden. But almost immediately, the cameras began to pick up things that didn't make sense. It started with small things. The camera facing the backyard would trigger in the middle of the night, but when they checked the footage, there was nothing there. Just the swaying branches of the old maple tree, the glint of rain on the grass. Sometimes the camera would catch a flicker of movement, a shadow darting across the lawn, but it was always too quick, too indistinct to make out. Mrs. Jensen chalked it up to faulty equipment, maybe a bug crawling across the lens. But her son Tyler wasn't so sure. One night, Tyler stayed up late, determined to catch whatever was triggering the cameras. He sat in the living room, the security feed open on his laptop, the house silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. At 2:13 a.m., the backyard camera was triggered. Tyler leaned in, squinting at the grainy black and white image. At first, he saw nothing. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the yard. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in what looked like a long coat, their face obscured by the brim of a hat. They moved with an unnatural stillness, almost gliding across the grass. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the figure approach the house, stopping just beneath the kitchen window. The figure stood there for several minutes, unmoving, before turning and disappearing back into the darkness. Tyler woke his mother, showing her the footage. She was shaken, but tried to reassure him. It was probably just a drifter, someone passing through. But Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong, something off about the way the figure moved, the way they seemed to know exactly where the cameras were. The next night, the pattern repeated. The figure appeared at almost the same time, standing in the same spot, staring up at the kitchen window. This time, Mrs. Jensen called the police, who arrived quickly but found nothing. The officers suggested it might be a neighbor playing a prank, but promised to keep an eye on the area. For the next week, the figure appeared every night, always at the same time, always in the same place. The footage became clearer, and Tyler noticed something strange. The figure never seemed to leave footprints, even when the ground was muddy from the rain. It was as if they weren't really there, as if they were some kind of shadow, a ghost caught on camera. Then one night, everything changed. At 2:13 a.m., the camera inside the kitchen was triggered. The footage showed the empty room, the soft glow of the nightlight casting long shadows across the floor. Suddenly, the back door creaked open, and the figure stepped inside. They moved silently, gliding across the floor, their face still hidden. The figure paused in front of the refrigerator, then turned and stared directly into the camera. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The figure reached up, slowly removing their hat, revealing a face that was both familiar and utterly alien. Tyler would later say that it looked like a distorted version of his own face, twisted and elongated, the eyes too large, the mouth stretched into a silent scream. The footage ended abruptly, the camera feed cutting to static. When the Jensens checked the kitchen, the back door was locked, the room empty. There was no sign that anyone had been there. No footprints, no fingerprints, nothing. But the footage was real, undeniable, a record of something that should not have been possible. The Jensens moved out a few weeks later, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the figure would return. The house sat empty for months, the camera still recording, still waiting. Eventually, a new family moved in, but as far as anyone knows, the figure never appeared again. What makes this story so terrifying isn't just the footage, but the sense of unreality, the feeling that the boundaries between the possible and the impossible have been shattered. The cameras, meant to provide security, instead became a window into something inexplicable, something that defies logic and reason. The Jensen story is a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones we can see or understand. They're the ones that slip through the cracks, the ones that leave us questioning everything we thought we knew. If you found these stories as chilling as I did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more true horror stories caught on camera. Have you ever captured something strange or unexplainable on your own security footage? Share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to make sure you never miss a new upload, tap the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones you catch when you're not even looking.